Thank you for coming to the role and opportunities of faith-based approaches to the environment and climate change. I'm Rebecca Franke, and with Lauren Dixon, we'll be bringing this webinar to you today. So in the meantime, before we actually get started, what I'd like to ask you to do is please use chat to share your name, your state, and your organization. And when you're done with that, if you could also rename yourself to add your preferred pronouns, that would be great. And please note that we will be recording the presentations. So if you'd like to take a look at them later or invite someone else to take a look at today's presentations, you'll have that opportunity. Hi, Mallory.
Hello, Rebecca.
Glad you could make it.
I'm looking forward to it.
And we're getting a spread. We've got Massachusetts, we've got South Carolina, Colorado, West Virginia. Okay, South Dakota. All right. So I think we're pretty much done identifying ourselves. That's great. So welcome again to the role and opportunities of faith-based approaches to the environment and climate change. So, very brief agenda. So today's webinar will last about 90 minutes. We'll start with some basic housekeeping, then we'll say a few words about who the Climate Emergency Mobilization Team is, and we are bringing you this webinar today. On to our guest presentation, and we'll finish up with Q&A and discussion. So nothing too surprising here. Mute your phone or computer, please. If you have a question at any point, please click on the Q&A option and type your question in the window, which displays. Don't use chat for off-topic or personal conversations. Please extend courtesy to your presenters. If you prefer to personally address your question to the presenters, feel free, but do raise your hand and wait to be recognized. And obviously, be respectful to everyone. So the Climate Emergency Mobilization Team is bringing you this webinar today. We believe in the necessity of local action as part of climate action. So we're focused on building a network of local climate activists. We have two websites, as you see there on the screen, the sierraclub.org site, and we are in the midst of migrating to a new location there. So you may not see all of our materials on our site yet, but we'll get there. And the other site that we have is Local Climate Actions, and I'll say more about that in a few minutes. Richard Rollins is our team manager, And if you want to follow up with any questions, or if you'd like to join with us, our email is climateemergency@sfbaSC.org. And don't bother to furiously copy these down. I will copy them out to chat for you. So as a team, we work to support climate activists who advocate for local actions that address the climate crisis. They include a growing and diverse number of people from across the U.S., from New York to Iowa to Washington State. We mobilize and support them through our discussion listserv, our 2 websites, our social media presence on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and our action alerts and newsletter. The resources that we make available include educational materials, climate success stories, lessons learned, and a toolbox for local climate action. We've loaded this toolbox with climate-related actions which cities across the country have undertaken. Our objective is for those actions to be picked up by other cities as they enact their own measures and programs. The benefit of this effort is that effective local actions don't need to be reinvented over and over again. Instead, the information and experience of early adopters can be shared. All right. Are there any questions before we start? Again, this presentation will be recorded, and I will be muting everyone. So just one moment, Lauren. Okay, all yours, Lauren.
Oh, would you mind going to the next slide? All right, so I just want to hop in and say thank you all for coming. And also, we've got 2 really great panelists that I'm really excited to hear from today. They have generously volunteered their time to give us this webinar and all of the great information that they'll have. So if you wouldn't mind, next slide. Our 2 panelists are Dr. Pankaj Jain and Dr. Aaron Lopez. So Dr. Jain is a renowned academic leader with international recognition in fields of sustainability. Jain studies film studies and diaspora studies. With over 30 years of experience in academia and the corporate world, he holds the position of Head of Department for Humanities and Languages at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study in Shimla, India. He also serves as the chair of the India Center at Flame University in Pune, India. And then our second panelist, Aaron Lopez, who will be joining us shortly in about 15 minutes or so, is a theologian researching energy ethics in the faith-based environmental movement. She's the senior manager of Laudato Si Animators program with Laudato Si Movement, which is actually how I met Aaron. She and I work together for the same company. She's currently also on the faculty of the St. Elizabeth University and serves as an Earth Institute Fellow at Columbia University. Aaron's had quite a few publications, but the 2 she wanted to highlight for this is Inspiring Sustainability, Planting Seeds for Action, and The Paradox of Christian Sacrifice, The Loss of Self, The Gift of Self, as well as a couple of articles on energy ethics and faith-based environmentalism. Most recently, if any of you are familiar with Catholicism, Pope Francis released a second part to Laudato Si titled Laudate Deum, and Aaron has written a couple of commentaries on Laudate Deum. So those are our 2 great panelists. A little additional housekeeping for this, like Rebecca mentioned, please just be mindful. I did notice that for some reason on my end, it's not showing that there's a Q&A option. So you may just ignore that. Just put your questions in the chat. We'll have Dr. Jain offer his information, and then Dr. Lopez will give her presentation for the webinar, and then there will be opportunities for discussion and dialogue towards the end if there are any questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we will address them during question time. With that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Jain.
Thank you, Lauren and Rebecca for conducting this webinar. It's really interesting great meeting Dr. Erin Lotz after a decade that I have worked with her for a publication long back. So old colleague from New Jersey days. Currently I'm in Dallas and in India. So very happy to be here and to present what I have to present from Indian spirituality, also called as Dharma, based in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. So most of what I will present today would apply or would be coming from the Hindu traditions, Buddhist traditions, and Jain traditions, the three ancient religious traditions of India. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I hope you can all see the screen. All right.
Yes.
So thank you. Really happy to be showing this image to you, and notice that some of you are, I think, from mountain regions of North America. And I was last winter, I was traveling across Utah and New Mexico and so on, taking my family to a winter break vacation, and notice similar mountains there also, right? In US, in North America, Europe, we have similar mountains. What distinguishes Indian Himalayas is that the entire Himalayan region is dotted with these temples, Hindu temples and Buddhist temples for the most part. Now, when these temples were established thousands of years back, I can say yes, 2000 years back, some of these temples are. The most prominent pilgrimage centers in the Hindu world, or the temples that are established, are the places which are the origins of the major rivers. So interesting to notice, and I, being born in India, still I didn't realize until recently that the most important pilgrimage places in the Hindu world, in Hinduism, are where the rivers start from. So where the Ganges or Ganga is called, Ganga is the Indian term, Ganges in English. Where Ganges or Ganga starts is one of the four major temples, and this is one of the temples I'm showing you in this image. It is called as Kedarnath. To be able to reach here, people have to walk up the hill. They have to take horses or so on. Or now the helicopter has also started. But originally, in ancient times, traditionally, people only walked, walking, or by horses they went. So what I want to show by this image is that the religious traditions, environmental resources, mountains, rivers, they all meet at one point in many such examples across the Hindu world. Similarly, I went to southern Indian, another pilgrimage place, same thing. Even today, the Ganga or Ganges, even though so much crowd now, the population has quadrupled, or I don't know how many times it has multiplied in India, yet these places, these rivers, these mountains continue to be revered. People continue to go and express their devotion, and they continue to revere the mountains, the rivers, the trees, the animals, and so on, which I'll show you in my presentation. All right, so Dharma and ecology. Dharma word itself is also interesting. Dharma word you may have heard. I think it is now part of Oxford English Dictionary as well. Dharma comes from Sanskrit root etymologically. Sanskrit root word of dharma is dhri, D-H-R-I. Dhri means to sustain. So dharma in one way, in essence, can be translated as sustaining force, or the force that provides sustainability to the entire cosmos. So cosmic sustainability, cosmic sustenance is part of dharma. Dharma etymologically means that. So that became the title of my very first book, which I published more than a decade back when I started my career in this. My PhD is also in Dharma and ecology. So that was the title of my first book, Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities. And that's where I start this journey from. All right. So I think a couple of slides I'll skip for interest of time, but I'll start from here. National Geographic is a prominent magazine in the US, as I'm sure you have all heard of that magazine. Maybe you've read it also. Mm-hmm. You may have browsed through some pages, even some documentaries they make on environmental resources and wildlife and so on. So National Geographic magazine conducted a survey of all the major economies in the world, China, Russia, India, Australia, you can see on the map, right? In North America, Canada, Mexico, United States, of course, Brazil, which you don't see in the map, but Brazil also was part of that survey, and France and Germany, UK, and so on. what they concluded from 2008 to 2012. So 4 times they conducted this annual survey of major economies in the world. Almost every time they chose India to be the greenest economy, greenest country in the world. So we who have migrated from India and straddled in 2 worlds of the US and India, even Indians were surprised. How is India greenest? There's so much population, pollution, of course, with the burgeoning brimming population across India. How is India greenest? So when I looked deeper, I found that the 4 parameters that they selected, in all those 4 parameters, per capita carbon footprint of India is still the lowest compared to all the major economies in the world, compared to Australia, China, Russia, Brazil, Mexico, US, Canada, and so on. Why? What are those 4 parameters? One of the first parameters that they have in their survey is based on the food habits of Indians. Even though not everybody is vegetarian in India, but the major staple diet of Indians, millions and millions of Indians, 1.4 billion people, we are talking the largest population in the world now. Major part of their food is not beef, not pork, not mutton, but most of the people still are surviving on some lentils, dal, pulses, rice, wheat, fruits, and vegetables. That too, only such grains, only such foods, fruits, and vegetables that are grown locally. Most of the Indian economy, most of the Indian people live on local food, natural food, organic food, which are great slogans for US, for us in America. Right now I'm sitting in Dallas, right? So we all have a zeal to support local farmers market. But India runs on farmers market, right? Most of Indians are still heavily dependent on vegetarian food, even though not everybody is vegetarian. They do take some egg or chicken or even some other kind of meat, but not like 3 times a day, maybe once a week, maybe a couple of times a month, because I guess vegetarian food, local food is naturally cheaper for them, for most of Indians. So I've shown you here 2 graphs also. In the first graph, you see meat consumption by selected country. You see US is at the top, right? Almost 110 kilograms per day, right? Per person, per year, sorry, per year. In 1 year, Americans eat at least 100 kilograms. So more than, and we're talking here, more than 200 pounds of meat every year. You can do the math, right? And you see India is at the bottom. This is from 2013. It's a decade old, but you can get the idea. Still, so the trend still is similar. So Indian meat consumption was lower than even Kenya, and of course lower than China, UK, Canada, Brazil, and of course lower than US. So what it shows us is that the vegetarian food habits of Indians keep the overall carbon footprint of India at the lowest. Per capita carbon footprint is at the lowest. Second parameter that they used in National Geographic survey was the car ownership of major economies in the world. So if you see, Italy has the highest per person passenger car density in 2009. If you see the second graph here, Italy shows 600 cars for every 1,000 people, right? Number of passengers cars per 1,000 people. Yeah, so every 1,000 people had 600 cars in Italy, 500 in Germany. US has 450. India had maybe 10 cars for 1,000 people as late as 2009. This may have changed a little bit. Now probably 20. I don't have the latest data. I couldn't find online. But what it shows again here is that because of the heavily dependence of Indians on public transport or bicycles or walking, simply walking, that keeps their carbon footprint also one of the lowest compared to other major economies of the world. So much so that some of the people, those who may have owned or who actually own cars, but even they would prefer carpooling or traveling by public transport just to avoid traffic jams in the morning or evening. So this idea of minimalism, minimize usage of natural resources in the form of car ownership or vegetarianism, minimal usage of meat consumption, these 2 are the biggest factors for Indians to keep their carbon footprint much lower than other economies of the world. And this all data I'm citing here from Ramchand Guha and other books are, you can see that I've referenced those. So these two things that we see, vegetarianism and minimalism, they can be traced back to the dharmic teachings of Indian traditions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. To focus on Hinduism for now, Hinduism has these ideas of Panch Mahabhutas. Panch means five, fruit punch, right? For 5 kinds of fruits. It's supposed to have, when we go to grocery stores in America, fruit punch should have 5 fruits. I'm not sure how many kinds of fruits we get in that fruit punch, but the punch word in English comes from panch word in Sanskrit. Panch Mahabhutas, 5 great elements: the water, air, fire, earth, and space. These are the 5 great elements. All these 5 great elements Hindus considered sacred for thousands of years. The first major text of Hindus, the Rig Vedas, 4 Vedas and Rig Veda being the oldest, celebrated these 5 natural elements as the great divine elements. So air is divine, water is divine, fire is divine, earth is divine, and even space is divine from Hindu perspective. Not only the elements outside of us are divine, but those elements are also inside of us. So Hindus considered these 5 elements to be represented by eyes and mind and brain, the nose and body, and so on. So every element, every part of human body is connected with different natural elements, different 5 great Mahabhutas, that is 5 great elements. So what is outside of us is also inside of us. So even that way, our bodies also become divine. Every particle in the universe becomes divine by the second word, Ishavasyam. So 5 elements from universe, interconnected foundation, bond between senses and elements, right? Then Hinduism says Ishavasyam, the second word here. Ishavasyam means, Ish means divinity, Vasyam means abode or living region or living embodiment or living domain of divinity. Where is the living domain of divinity? Every particle. So that's what the second bullet here says. Divinity is omnipresent and takes infinite forms. So I was telling you that how rivers and mountains are all divine because of these ideas such as these that are mentioned in the Hindu sacred text for thousands of years, Vedas and Upanishads and other texts, where it says, and it's reflected in Hindu practices even today, where Ganges or Ganga is divine, earth or Prithvi or land or earth or soil is also divine because that's also goddess. Then I could have added even cow is divine, Mother Nature is divine, Mother India is also divine. And so all these feminine acceptance of feminine divinity is extremely common for Hindus across the Hindu world, not just in India, but even in the US and Europe and Australia, wherever Hindus are present. When Hindu temples are established in America, there are more than 1,000 temples in America. Many of the Hindu temples are established with reverence for the rivers of America also, Mississippi, Missouri, and other rivers of US are so water is brought for those rivers also, and even those rivers, those waters are also ritually purified, and that's how the temples start, even in America. All right, so the next 2 words I'm showing you is dharma and karma. Dharma is, as I mentioned, dharma comes from 3, sustainability. Dharma also means duty and virtue. So there are communities such as Bishnoi, this woman that you see on your screen. She is nurturing her own son or her own child with the same love and affection as she nurtures a deer cub in Rajasthan, a western desert state of India, where there is a significant part of that state is all desert. So Bishnoi community is one of the key communities that sustains the local flora and fauna. So any hunter or poacher, if it enters their region, and if there is a sound of hunting, there is a gunshot, for example, Bishnoi people will rush to that spot, catch the hunter, give that hunter to the police, and the court cases can run on and on. So there is a famous Bollywood star, celebrity, Salman Khan. He's still fighting a case with Bishnoi. Bishnoi sued him for hunting a black cub, and Salman Khan is still fighting that legal case for last 3 decades. So it goes on and on. Celebrity, non-celebrity, doesn't matter. If you hunted a deer, you face the consequences of Bishnoi people being the protector of local flora and fauna. Similarly, in America, when I was teaching, I used to teach at UNT in Dallas area. When I used to present this word tree hugger, my students would smile and laugh even. So tree hugging or tree hugger has kind of become a joke in America. I don't know why. It's a funny term. But tree hugger as a word was first exemplified by the Bishnois. in early 18th century, Amrita Devi, a Bishnoi woman, Hindu woman, she actually hugged her local tree because local soldiers wanted to cut hundreds of such trees. And they knew that if they can find such green trees, that would be a Bishnoi village. So as they go to this community, this tribe, as they start cutting the tree, local Bishnoi men, women, and children, they all hug those trees, and they are all killed by the local soldiers. And that word, actually literally hugging the tree, happened in the early 18th century, and then later happened in 1970s, when the Chipko movement was very popular across Himalayas. And because of the Chipko movement, thousands of indigenous trees in Himalayas are still protected. So Chipko traces its inspiration from Bishnois, and that is how the local flora and fauna is saved in Himalayas and in Rajasthan, like I mentioned these two examples. Next word I want to present is karma, or karma means action or cyclical action. So karma has an eco impact, also ecological impact. How? If you dump it, you drink it. If you dump trash into rivers, that water is going to haunt back to you. If you dump plastic into your ocean, that water is somehow coming back and going to you'll be forced to drink it. That is the karma law, right? Action and consequences. It's all interconnected. So dharma and karma as ecologically impactful. The next two words I'm presenting is Tantra and Yoga. Tantra has also body-earth connection, almost similar to what I was presenting earlier, the Panch Mahabhutas, the 5 great elements. Yoga has become extremely popular across America. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry in US now. But yoga comes from yuj as the Sanskrit root. Yoga or yuj means to yoke, to join. Yoga and Tantra together, they celebrate the universal divine energy. It is not just about physical postures, which is great, but it starts from physical postures, but it goes on to celebrate the unison, the unity of our soul with divinity. The divinity within us, within our body, within our mind, within our soul is to be in sync with the universal divine energy. That is what Tantra and Yoga celebrate. Also, the prerequisite of performing yoga postures is ahimsa or non-violence, which means every yoga practitioner must be vegetarian. That is also a prerequisite in yoga, according to the Yoga Sutra, the most ancient text of yoga, written by Patanjali thousands of years back. And that again brings our carbon footprint really low, as I was explaining in the beginning. So vegetarianism is a prerequisite to start performing yoga. And I just mentioned ahimsa word. So here it is. Ahimsa means non-violence, the greatest dharma, according to the Jain tradition. So far I was focusing so far on Hindu tradition, but now these two terms are common across all three: Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Ahimsa means non-violence. So Jainism defines ahimsa, non-violence, as the greatest dharma, the greatest virtue, the greatest ethics is non-violence. Non-violence towards every creature in the universe, non-violence towards water, non-violence towards fire, non-violence towards air, because even they have soul, according to Jain tradition. So Jains are supposed to not burn any lamp, not switch on any light after sunset, because that will lead to additional negative karma, because you are doing more violence to fire, air, and water. So do not waste water. Do not use electricity after sunset. Do not switch on any fan. Violence to air. Air is also alive. Air has soul also. So that is the ultimate expression of non-violence that Jains practice. Of course, they're all vegetarians. Most of the Jains are vegetarians across the world. Jains are in America also and across the world now. Belgium has a Jain temple. Canada has Jain temples. United States has them. Africa. So across the world now, we're talking Hindus and Jains and Buddhists across the world, right? So non-violence. And food. Jains are strictly vegetarians, but even within vegetarian food, they will avoid potatoes, onions, garlics, and so on. Why? Because food that comes from roots and plants, roots and stems of a plant, if you consume root of a plant or a stem of a plant, you're killing an entire plant. So that is again more violence. So take only a byproduct of the plant. Do not cut the plant itself. That is the ultimate practice of non-violence that Jains practice. Ahimsa to the earth improves one's karma. So Jain monks and nuns, they never ride in a vehicle, because that is again more violent, because you're burning more fossil fuels. You're supposed to only walk. If you're a monk or a nun in Jain tradition, you're only walking, never riding any aircraft or car, or even not even a bullock cart, not even a bicycle, only walking. That too barefoot, because if you wear leather footwear, you will unintentionally, you might step on a bug or an ant. So even that violence is to be avoided. So that is the ultimate examples of non-violence. Sannyasa is a very, very common practice across the Hindu world, Buddhist world, and Jain world. Sannyasa means renunciation, asceticism, where people do fasting, consumption is limited, and renunciation is practiced. So that is also common across the Catholic world. I'm sure Dr. Lewis will speak more on that. So that's also extremely common practice for thousands of years in Indian traditions. Now, sacred groves. This brings us back to kind of Hindu world, where a portion of forest, a fragment of forest, is reserved for local deities, right? So that forest area itself becomes divine. So nobody will take even a leaf from that forest, right? And so entire forest is treated like a divine temple. So it's protected by the community. It has religious connotation, and such sacred groves can be found across India and across the world also. And hunting and logging are prohibited. So that is another way of revering your local environmental resources based on dharmic ideas or religious ideas coming from Hinduism or Buddhism also. Bishnois, I already mentioned. They were the first tree huggers of the world. The history I hinted a little bit. Then Swadhyay Parivar. Swadhyay Parivar started about 100 years back in Mumbai. And they were awarded Templeton Prize in 1997. Templeton Prize, which has bigger money than even Nobel Prize. Why? Because they constructed something unique, something innovative in India, in Western Indian states of Gujarat and Maharashtra, where they created new sacred groves, new ways of rainwater harvesting by bringing spirituality into it. They said earth is divine and water is divine, but earth will quench your thirst only if you quench the thirst of Mother Earth. So new ways of rainwater harvesting were discovered, were developed. New ways of organic farming were developed, cooperative farming were developed, but all with spiritual foundation. So that is why they were awarded and they were recognized for combining dharma and ecology in such a way to sustain local resources. Then Gandhi, everybody is familiar with Gandhi's name. Gandhi was inspired by Rajchandra, a Jain guru. That time Mahatma Gandhi was staying in South Africa, practicing his law practices, and his teacher was in India, and they were communicating through letters. And Rajchandra inspires Gandhi to adopt principles such as truth, nonviolence, simplicity, celibacy, self-reliance, and austerities. And Gandhi's life itself has been called as an ecological treatise by Professor Vinay Lal, whom I'm quoting from UCLA in Los Angeles. So Gandhi's diet was what? He would consume very small meals of fruits and nuts only. He would practice silence. He used to practice walking, almost like a Jain monk. No, very less riding on a vehicle, only walking, for the most part walking. Cultivation of the small animals were very dear to him, goats and sheep and so on, as you see even in Hollywood film Gandhi. Spinning wheel, we all talk of less industrial products and so on. Gandhi exemplified all that long before us, right? He made his own cloth without burning any fossil fuel. He made his own cloth by spinning a wheel, as you see in this picture up there on the screen, on your screen. Abhorrence of waste. There was an incident where Gandhi's son loses a piece of pencil, and Gandhi starts regretting that, what did I do wrong that my son does not realize the importance of even a small piece of pencil, because pencil comes from nature, from planet. Planetary resources are being invested even in a small piece of pencil. We cannot waste even anything for that matter. So there was some examples from Gandhi's life, how he combined the ideas of dharma and ecology. So going forward, so if we take this a bit deeper look in what dharma is, dharma combines the ideas of religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. Dharma combines ethical ideas of how humans should live on this planet. Dharma also combines the physical characteristics, physical properties of fire and air and earth and water and so on. So all these three worlds of environmentalism, ethics, and environment and religion are all when they all combine, they're all overlapping, and that is what gives us dharma. And that is what dharma is understood by most of the people living across the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain world, they translate dharma as something that connects with supernatural world, human world, and natural world. This is even the Indian languages have this, all Indian languages have this word dharma, and that is how they translate it with multifaceted, multidimensional meanings, and that's how dharma can work very well with, and it has worked very well with environmental resources, environmentalism, and so on, which is what I was showing you some examples. So that way, what is moral becomes ecological, what is ecological becomes dharmic. Now, quoting a senior anthropologist from Syracuse University in New York, Professor Angold says, human behaviors irrevocably are interwoven with the natural environment's condition. The deterioration of one implies and involves the other. You see how humans and nature have always been interwoven in the Hindu or Indic world, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain world. Then Merritt and Inden and Appadurai, more scholars I'm quoting here, that difference between mind and body, difference between culture and nature is of degree rather than of kind. It's a continuum rather than a moral, rather than a watertight compartment of this is body, this is mind, this is nature, this is culture. That separation does not happen in across the Indian cultural system that we saw some examples here. And that is what I explained more in detail with concrete examples from my anthropological research across India. And so dharma of nature inspires dharma of humans. Dharma of humans in turn becomes ecodharma. And ecodharma is what can take care of our environmental resources without consciously becoming environmentalist. Just by following the dharma of nature, just by becoming better human beings, environmentalism becomes our second nature, and we inherently become protector, defender, even people who start revering natural resources, as we saw in some of the examples that I presented today. That completes my presentation because I saw Dr. Lose is here, and so I limited myself. And I'll take more questions when my turn comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jain. As always, it's a pleasure to hear from you about the deep wisdom of the traditions you represent. And I'm delighted to join all of you today from the Sierra Club. And thank you for being part of our discussion about faith traditions and their capacity to inspire change. So from my perspective, I would love to share just very briefly some reflections on faith traditions overall, and then my Catholic tradition in particular. I represent the Laudato Si movement. I was a Catholic theology professor for 10 years, and for the past 2 years, I've been working full-time at a global nonprofit that works for climate justice and biodiversity justice. And we're inspired by the Pope's document, Laudato Si, which you may remember was published in 2015 in advance of the Paris summit, and was widely recognized as a tremendous breakthrough in ecological critique, recognition of the interdependence of so many social problems with ecological degradation, and a powerful call to reject fossil fuels. Yet this work of the Pope, it goes against the background of an incredible interfaith coalition. Here you can see the logos of just a few of the interfaith groups that are out there taking care of the earth. Interfaith Power and Light, Green Faith, Religions for the Earth. Those are interfaith organizations. And then there are many that represent particular traditions. There are young evangelicals for climate action. There are the Green Muslims. There is this wonderful group, Kanfei Nesharim. It is a group of Orthodox Jews, organizing for sustainable living. And in my research among faith-based environmentalists of multiple traditions, I've seen there are 7 features that are common to people from many traditions. One is that they have a high scientific literacy. Another is that they're very much aware of the independence of our global systems, economic, political, cultural, chemical, ecological, social. And they have a commitment to social justice that stems from their faith traditions. In a fascinating way, I observed that many of these people were reporting a sense of a bigger God in their own personal faith journey. They felt that because of their ecological concerns, their moral universe was expanding, and their conception of God and God's concerns was enlarging, to see God as concerned not just for the human, but for the ecosphere and the cosmos. So additionally, they all showed a reverence for creation. Many worked in interfaith coalitions. And a final interesting characteristic is that many spoke about being independent thinkers. And I think perhaps that's what empowered them to take action in environmental sustainability when maybe they were the leaders in their congregation on this issue. And one of the questions I had approaching all these people, I conducted focus groups and interviews across the United States with multiple faith traditions, and saw that they all had green teachings, such as Dr. Jain has just shared. Yet even with teaching and preaching, often less is done than we would like. And why is that? And my conclusion is that many people face the knowledge gap, where they're not convinced or concerned. There's also a caring gap, where they may have a knowledge and recognition of the problem, but feel conflicted between taking action for the environment and all the other responsibilities of their life. And then finally, there's the action gap, where they care, they're concerned, but are not sure what to do. So congregations offer a valuable power in this movement because they have the moral authority to say caring for creation is an ethical obligation. And so it makes this work more relevant to everybody. It counters the assumption that some have that environmentalism is irrelevant to faith. And it's also unifying, and it counters the crisis we have in this country where environmentalism is perceived as a divisive and partisan issue. When care for creation is grounded in faith, it is unifying and calls everyone to reckon with their moral obligation. And a great way to lead past the action gap is in groups, such as you might find in a congregation, where people's shared values reinforces one's own individual motives. People find moral support, and their networks leverage individual activity. And finally, groups are more fun. This is a tough challenge dealing with the environmental crisis. We need the support and the encouragement of working with others. So there's a renewable energy that comes from congregations. And I love this picture of a Unitarian church that has an earth icon in its sanctuary. And it just shows how the moral orientation towards caring for our common home gains such power and persuasion when it comes from a faith congregation. As well, people gain a sense of hope and the virtue of persistence, which is a religious trait, a religious habit. So turning to my Catholic tradition and Laudato Si, there isn't time to dig into the richness of this tremendous encyclical, but I encourage everyone to read it. It is not difficult to read, and it is fascinating. You can find it online. Just Google Vatican Laudato Si, and you'll find it. But to highlight a few key themes, the Pope emphasizes that this is one complex crisis. The social and environmental crisis is interlinked. Poverty, inequity, poor health, inability to promote just development of economies, all of these are interconnected with environmental degradation. He has a particular interpretive paradigm, which he calls the technocratic paradigm, in which he critiques the power and the glamour of technology to captivate us and make us feel that any technological advancement is a necessary progress that we must adopt. Instead, he calls us to examine those technologies and say, are they useful? Are they improving people's lives? Is this good for society? So he calls us to a critique of the technocratic paradigm that has overtaken our societies. He also critiques a mentality in which profit maximization is the ultimate idol. When profits above all are the goal, when workers' health, when a circular economy that cares for its waste, when the fossil fuel production that contaminates our environment and leads to the greenhouse gases destroying our climate, these factors are overlooked because of the maximization of profit. So he has a very strong critique of this as well. Instead, he insists that the rich and poor have equal dignity. This is a theological protest rooted in a biblical conviction that the spirit of life dwells in every creature. And Laudato Si has a beautiful Franciscan spirituality, recognizing our relationships with every creature, brother sun, sister moon. It's a beautiful spirituality. And fundamentally, he writes, creation is of the order of love. And because of this, we're called to care for everything in the cosmos and to recognize this is our obligation. Now, 8 years after Laudato Si, the Pope was moved to write again. And he just in October 4th issued Laudate Deum. It's astonishing that we've seen this second letter so soon. 8 years is nothing in the time span of the Catholic Church. And clearly the Pope is not at all satisfied with the progress that has been made. Again, you can Google this document, Vatican Laudate Deum, and I urge you to do so. It is fascinating. It's even shorter. It's extremely short, and it's very pointed and targeted. And he calls out powerful elites who are deceiving society about false promises of progress, about greenwashing, against pretending to be taking action when they are not. It is an extraordinary denunciation of deception by the powerful who have the responsibility to take action. I've really never seen anything like it. It's not just for the powerful, though. The Pope also asks all of us to look at our own habits, our own lives, and to recognize that ordinary people, ordinary citizens, maybe not those on this call, because I recognize everyone here is very concerned. But he notes that people contrive to not see what is real, delaying important decisions and pretending that nothing will happen. So the responsibility is for all of us. And at the end of the document, he does particularly call out the United States and other high-consuming nations for our patterns of consumption and waste. He calls for obligatory and drastic action at the COPs. This letter is written for COP28, and he demands that there be 3 conditions for the energy transition: that it be efficient, obligatory, and readily monitored. And he calls for it to be drastic, intense, and count on the commitment of all. It's extremely strong language. So how might we all feel seeing this? Well, there's a blend, I think, in many environmentalists of hope, anger, and courage, which is what St. Augustine has brought together for us in this wonderful remark. Hope has 2 beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. And our courage comes from the heart, from what we love. And I have this picture of a young girl who is part of our movement, our global movement. She's in high school, she's very young. And she loves this pond on her family's property. It's a polluted pond, and she nurtured it back to life by taking away the sources of pollution, by learning about the sorts of plants that would need to be restocked in the pond, by testing its chemical composition. Her dedicated love actually restored this pond to health. And we can see the examples of others. Emma and Mary, who are colleagues of ours through the Catholic Climate Covenant, an American partner organization. And they work in partnership for advocacy at multiple levels. You can see Mary here in front of the Capitol building, and Emma is working through dioceses to urge them to adopt zero carbon plans. So very ambitious work that she's undertaking with a group of trained and strategic young people working to advance these goals. And then there's our witness of public gathering. Some of you may have attended some of the big climate marches. These are images from the March to End Fossil Fuels of just 2 months ago in New York City. My organization, the Laudato Si movement, has a local chapter, the Metro New York chapter, which you can see here marching through the streets. And before the march, we gathered on the steps of this church to hear young people share their concerns. And here's Daniel, a Boy Scout and a great dedicated speaker for the cause. So what can all of you do? Well, it's so important, as I said, to find a group, a cause. If you're the member of the Sierra Club, then you have many campaigns and initiatives to join, which is tremendous. And if you can gather in person and work on local initiatives, or even work on national ones by perhaps having an old-fashioned letter writing campaign. We all know those paper letters have more of an impact than the electronic emails that we click and send. My organization is hosting a petition to inspire change at the COP. That's something everyone is welcome to join. You can go to laudatosimovement.org and follow the prompts. And you can get involved in our advocacy programs. We support campaigns for biodiversity and climate change. We promote divestment, and we support the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty. If you prefer to work in an interfaith space, Interfaith Power and Light is a wonderful organization that has chapters in almost every state and is very successful. So you could look up Interfaith Power and Light. Just one more thing to share that's exciting from the Catholic Church is the Laudato Si Action Platform. This is a global sustainability platform that has been sent to every Catholic church, diocese, university, it's available for families, for individuals, and it's an in-depth sustainability guide with metrics, goalposts, suggestions, supports. It invites the entire Catholic world to begin charting and preparing its journey to sustainability. So it's a truly it's a truly in-depth and comprehensive effort coming from the Vatican. So with that, I will hand the floor back to our host. I think we may be at time, but it's been wonderful to be with you all.
Hi, Erin, we did just have one question in the chat for you if you have the time, but if you need to step away, no worries.
Sure. Is that Denise's question?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. The preferential option for the poor and the support of human dignity is really at the foundation of Catholic efforts. Environmental justice is really where the Catholic community has centered its work on concern for marginalized communities who are most targeted by pollution, by chemicals, by, of course, their vulnerability to climate change impacts. So that is a guiding motivation for the Catholic tradition. We are rooted in the Genesis call to honor all persons created in the image and likeness of God, and to defend human dignity, to defend human life. And so that means that those environmental justice issues that endanger human well-being are really the ones the Catholic community feels most strongly about defending. So that's a very important part. Increasingly, as we become aware of how much biodiversity must be protected in order to support ecological flourishing for humans, biodiversity also becomes a central goal. And as I mentioned, one of the beautiful aspects of the appeal to St. Francis is his spirituality of communion with all creatures. Brother Wolf, Sister Owl, Brother Tree, these are parts of our family.
All right, fantastic. I believe that is all of the questions for Erin, and we greatly appreciate your time with this. I think we'll probably end up wrapping up a little bit earlier. But Dr. Jane, there was also a question for you in the chat. Do you know?
Lauren? Oops, excuse me. I think Denise had another question. It's in the chat.
I see the one for Dr. Jane, the one for Dr. Lopez, and then she said, "Thanks for answering my question."
Okay. She's just commenting. Okay.
Okay. Dr. Jane, the question from Denise, do you know of any ongoing initiatives or projects within Jainism that focus on educating youth about environmental issues and sustainability?
Yes. So Jains are extremely tiny community in India, less than 1% of the population, but that also amounts to 5 million people across India and across the world now. Probably not more than 10 million. So even the tiny becomes large because population is at different scale in India. But to answer the question, the focus has always been in Indian tradition. The focus has always been on lifestyle itself that sustains the environment. So less consumption, like I was hinting, less consumption of electricity, water, air, food, everything has to be always curtailed, very disciplined diet, disciplined lifestyle. So that automatically in turn keeps the carbon footprint, per capita carbon footprint, certainly at a much lower level. So that is part of the spiritual training, spiritual life itself of Jains is based on that. Ideally, of course, many people may not be sticking to that lifestyle, but that's the ideal at least. At least the hope is that they will be living by that lifestyle. In addition, the Jains in America, those who are born in the US, they are inspiring their parents who came from India to not just stop at vegetarianism, but go on and become vegans. Why consume even dairy? Because even dairy is violence. Meat certainly is violence. Egg is violence, but why stop there? Even renounce dairy products, which is violence. So it is happening more vigorously in this country, which is interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
I believe that was all the questions. Rebecca, did you want to go ahead and wrap up?
Actually, I do have a couple of questions for Dr. Jain.
Fantastic.
Sure.
So initially in your presentation, you showed a temple in the mountains.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm wondering how much people are being impacted by, in a sense, the corruption of some of the fundamental elements. So if you're making pilgrimage to the Himalayas and you notice the melting glaciers, is that having an impact in the sense that the divine may be revealing something that one should be concerned about?
Yes. So yes, melting glaciers is a burning issue of our times. And luckily, fortunately, that issue is now increasingly raised in even local language TV news reports, newspapers and media channels, and government is also very aware of these issues. So it is now reaching the common masses also. But those who are not, let's say, those who are not following these kind of news reports in media, they might still be unaware of these issues. So there might be, so let's say those who are still not really educated, they might still be left out of this information revolution that is happening across the world with melting glaciers and global warming and climate change and so on. But I think most of them, and it is part of the education system also, in their syllabi, in their schools and colleges, these issues are very much discussed. But those who are making the pilgrimage may still be, I hate to judge anybody, but if they have not gone through the latest news reports or education system, they might still be unaware. So another way to answer this could be that, like I mentioned in the beginning, that if you're walking to these mountain places for pilgrimage, your carbon footprint is still very less. But if you're taking a helicopter ride to reach these mountain tops or these temples, then you're defeating the purpose. So yes, ideal is one thing. I presented the ideal cases also, but also there is a practical reality. There is also the fact that there is more money at hand with many Indians now who can spend money to take a helicopter ride to reach these temples. That was never the idea. The idea was to merge with nature and then make the pilgrimages. So most of them are still walking, but there are some so-called really wealthy people, those are not following the tradition. So hopefully that answered the question. Yes.
Okay, I do have another.
Yes.
You also, of course, mentioned Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
And his belief in a simple and basic life.
Yes.
And minimal consumption.
Yes.
Certainly, that was evident, I think, when India gained independence still. But since then, since the mid-20th century, of course, India has changed a lot.
Yes.
So with the concern about climate change, do you see people in any way returning to the teachings of Gandhi?
Oh, that's again a burning question, and I wish there was a simple answer. Actually, just last night I had a discussion on this very topic. When India gained its independence, there was the first prime minister was Nehru. Nehru, even though he paid lip service to Gandhi, Nehru adopted a very westernized model of development of heavy industries and heavy dams, big dams, right, and technological innovations and so on. Gandhi was all about self-sustained villages, local economies, local food, like you already recognized. So all that changed heavily, like you rightly said. India moved from Gandhi's vision to Nehru's vision, and now from Nehru to Modi's vision, which is all about big dams, big technology, big industries, because we have to recognize that the governments have to provide jobs to millions and millions of, India is the youngest country and the oldest civilization. In this oldest civilization, when the country's millions of people are young and hungry for jobs, America is their role model. Everybody wants to own a Tesla car and want to live in a big house and want to own a big TV screen. In India also. So those ambitions are so fired up. So India is on this bandwagon to become mini America, unfortunately. So I think its onus is on all the leaders of the world, especially I think in the US, as revered Pope also mentioned, that if America changes itself, it will give a great message to people, aspiring people in countries like in India also, that if America is renouncing its ways and improving itself, let's go for more solar panels and electric cars and wind turbines and so on. India will also do it even more vigorous. It's already doing. India achieved its climate targets almost a decade earlier than it set out for. India is already rapidly changing into renewable energy. That's a great thing that India and China are also doing. But yet we have to recognize it's an aspiring country trying to become a major economy. It's already the 5th largest economy in the world, and it aspires to be 3rd or maybe 1st. Who knows what might happen? So all those conflicts, intellectual conflicts, moral conflicts are there in India. But problem is also that practical reality is that Indians have realized that if we don't put brakes on our fossil fuel burning economy, our air is going to be poisoned completely. Already Delhi and Mumbai air is at its worst level, especially in the winters. So Indians are aware of these things now, of course, because they have to breathe that poison every day if we're living in Delhi, especially in winter. So there is a great push to cut down on fossil fuel consumption. Food is already still, for the most part, it's mostly vegetarian, country as a whole. And the fossil fuel in vehicles, I think, is one of the big, huge issues that Indians have to really curtail. If that happens, I think it will be great news for India and for the world, because being the major economy now. Yes, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Lauren, do you want to wrap up?
It looks like we had one more question. It was Denise again. She said, similar to my question for Dr. Lopez, do Indian religions as a whole prioritize the poor and marginalized?
All right, that's a great question also. As actually when Professor Lotz was presenting, it was reminding me of Mahatma Gandhi's words. And I think I partly answered the question already when Rebecca was asking that Gandhi's vision was very much on villages and local economies and so on. But Nehruvian vision, the first Prime Minister of India, moved away from Gandhi and it became industrialized economy. It's becoming industrialized economy now with leadership with the current Prime Minister. But being a democracy, every 5 years, they have to win an election. Major electorates are still in villages and towns. So yes, the governments have to be pro-poor, pro-villages, right? Even though those villagers are trying to become mini cities. They also want big cars, and not big cars, but at least cars and houses and so on. So yes, pro-poor, right? And they have to, but poor in the sense that poor have to turn into rich very soon. Everybody wants to turn into becoming, mini America, like I keep saying. But the good news is that they are becoming increasingly aware of the many dangers of fossil fuel-based economy. So the push is, there is no political divide as we see in America. All parties support green economy. All parties want to cut down fossil fuel. All of the parties. There is no such polar opposites like we see Republicans versus Democrats in the US. That kind of a divide does not exist in India, which is great news. And everybody's pro-poor, pro-green economy. But the issue is how fast India can implement all those great ideas. Right? Hope that answers.
Okay, I believe that is all of the questions that we have. Dr. Jane Denise said thank you. Saw another comment. Rushton, yes, unfortunately, you did miss most of the presentation. I think there was some confusion with the starting time, but this kind of leads me into my ending statement. Hopefully, sometime in spring to started my video. Hopefully, sometime in spring to early summer, we will have another faith-based presentation. We're going to cover Buddhism and Judaism during that time, so we hope that you will be able to join us during that time. So keep an eye out for the chapter newsletters and other methods that will push the information out to you. And then with that, Rebecca, I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for attending today. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope everyone else did too. And if you'd like to go back and view it again, we will have it up and available for you. We'll let you know when that happens. And if you'd like to invite other folks to take a look at it, I think that would be valuable as well. So unless there are any final questions, I'd just like to say thank you and have a good remainder of the day.
Thank you.